The Mazda RX-7 was a legendary sports car of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and famous for its handling, lightweight, and high-revving rotary engine. Replaced by the sublime RX-8, it was canceled in 2012 here in the US. But have you ever wondered what the heck were the RX-1 through 6s? Well, welcome back to All Cars, y'all. If you're new here, my name is John, and today we're going to be doing a far too brief history of the Wankel engine and the RX, the rotary experimental cars by Mazda. But first, a little bit of history. Mazda itself started in 1920 in Hiroshima as a cork manufacturing company called Toyo Kogyo. In 1931, they introduced the Mazda Go auto rickshaw, named from the god Ahura Mazda in Zoroastrianism, representative of harmony, intelligence, and wisdom. It also helped the name sounded familiar to the company's founder. Mitsubishi handled sales distribution, and the Mazda logo of the time was their name over the Mitsubishi logo. Through World War II, the company manufactured weapons including the Type 99 rifle, and afterwards continued production of the Mazda Go until 1959, when they introduced the K360 three-wheeled truck. The company did not adopt the Mazda name until 1984, although all vehicles were branded as Mazdas before that. They released their first four-wheeled vehicle in 1960, the R360K car, a two-door, 2+2 design with a rear-mounted 356cc V2 air-cooled engine. Initially successful, it was soon joined by the P360 in 1962. That car, known as the Carol, was a two-door, four-passenger car with a rear-mounted, water-cooled 358cc four-cylinder engine. It was then, in the early 1960s, Mazda began to look at the Wankel engines for their lightweight, high power, and as a way to set themselves apart from the other larger Japanese brands. But the Wankel didn't start with Mazda. German engineer Felix Wankel conceived of and designed a rotary compressor in the 1920s and received his first patent for a rotary engine in 1934. In 1951, after World War II, he began working with NSU, the German auto and motorcycle manufacturer that later became a part of Audi. He was tasked specifically to design a rotary supercharger for motorcycle engines. Taking his design and developing an engine, he had a working prototype in 1957, producing about 20 horsepower. It was complex, so NSU pivoted to a design by Hans-Dieter Paschke that became a template for rotary engines being viable. Wankel disliked this simpler but less elegant design. Still, he obtained a U.S. patent for it in 1961. In 1963, NSU put the first Wankel engine in a car, their Spider sports car, as a 1-liter unit making 54 horsepower. While powerful for its size, it was troublesome. It's appropriate to take a moment here and look briefly at the Wankel design. In a standard engine with pistons, the linear motion of one or more pistons is converted to a rotational motion at the crankshaft. In a Wankel engine, one or more roughly triangular-shaped rotors rotate around a central shaft. The seals at the end points of the rotor, called the apex seals, can be a failure point, and the NSU design struggled with that. Mazda became just one of multiple companies that licensed the rights to the Wankel engine, such as Nissan, Toyota, Ford, and more, including in aviation and marine applications, and of course the ill-fated GM rotary program. Unlike NSU, Mazda chose to take a bit more time to further develop the design and not rush it into production. NSU followed up the Spider in October of 1967 with the four-door Ro 80, a car that became famous for engine failures at those apex seals. Front-engined and front-wheel drive, the twin-rotor Wankel engine made 113 horsepower. Mazda began production of their first Wankel-powered car, the Cosmo 110S, in May of 1967. A two-seat sports car meant to be the halo car for the brand, it had a two-rotor 982cc engine making 110 horsepower, hence the name. Hand-built and low volume, in mid-1968 it was updated and the engine now produced 100 horsepower. Also in 1967, Mazda introduced the second generation of their Familia small car, the predecessor of the 323 and the Protege. While it came with a 987cc four-cylinder as standard, in 1968 they offered the rotary-engined R100 as a two-door and four-door sedan body styles. The engine was carried over from the Cosmo, and the car received unique exterior treatments, including round tail lights that became a feature of Mazda rotary cars, and a plusher interior. By 1973, the rotary was canceled in the Familia, but the R100 was one of the first Mazdas imported to the US between 71 and 72. In 1970, Mazda introduced the Capella as a larger alternative to the Familia. For export markets, it was called the 616 or the 618 and came standard with either a 1.5 or a 1.6-liter engine. As an option, there was the 12A Wankel engine making roughly 130 horsepower, and it was offered in the US from 71 to 74 as the RX2. American emission standards strangled the engine down to 120 horsepower. In 1971, they introduced the Grand Familia, another larger alternative to the Familia, and exported to most markets as the 808 or 818. While the base car offered a two-door, four-door, and wagon variants, all with four-cylinder engines, they created a rotary version called the Savannah, and for the export markets named it the RX3. In America, it came with the same 12A engine as the RX2, and it remained on sale through 1978 with updates, including 1 year with a sports wagon version. The RX3 was the most popular rotary-engined vehicle Mazda built before the RX-7, and with over 50% of those sales being a coupe. In 1972, a second generation of Mazda's flagship car, what we would know as the 929, was introduced, and it too received a rotary power option and was sold internationally as the RX-4. Offering a coupe, sedan, and a wagon that replaced the RX-3 wagon, it used a 13B version of the engine, making 110 horsepower and 117 pound-feet of torque. Between 74 and 77, Mazda was so bullish on the rotary engine that they offered the world's first and only Wankel-powered pickup in their B-Series trucks, the REPU, rotary engine pickup. With a 1.3-liter 13B rotary engine and a 4-barrel carb, it was an early success, but sales tanked the following years. In 1975, a second generation of the Cosmo appeared, internationally exported as the 121 for the standard engine and as the RX-5 with the rotary, to the US in 1976. It was now positioned as a personal luxury car and a somewhat awkwardly styled fastback with 3 side windows. The next year, in 1977, inspired by the Lincoln Continental, they added a Landau option. The current 13B engine was the offering in the US with a manual or 3-speed automatic as an option. A poor seller, sales ended in America after 1978 but continued to be updated for Japan. It's worth mentioning here, between 1975 and 1977, Mazda also offered the wonderfully named RoadPacer in the Japanese market. Starting its life as a full-sized Australian Holden Premier, they were shipped to Japan sans engine and transmission and fitted with the 13B engine. They were poor sellers and are notable really only for being the only General Motors product fitted with a rotary engine and made available for public sale. One ongoing disadvantage of rotary engines was that they had lower fuel economy, even though they could be constantly improved to meet the ever-increasing emission standards. In 1973, the world was plunged into the first gas crisis, with buyers shifting quickly for cars that maximized efficiency. Sales fell, and Mazda focused their rotary engines away from family cars and into sports machines. With the slow sales of the RX-5 but the strong sales of the smaller coupe, the RX-3, both were replaced in 1978 when Mazda introduced the world to the RX-7. The first generation was sold worldwide until 1985 through 2 updates. Small, lightweight, and with the compact rotary engine behind the front axle, it was an immediate hit. Offered with the 12A rotary, the 1.3-liter 13B, initially a 4-speed manual and later a 5-speed, and with an optional 3-speed auto. Near the end of its run, it also offered a turbocharged version of the 12A in Japan. Nearly 500,000 were sold, with over 70% of those being just in the US. The second generation debuted in '85, completely redesigned and sporting a very Porsche-like profile. Focusing on the American market, it was less edgy than the first generation and a softer sport tour, but now with an independent rear suspension, rack and pinion steering, and disc brakes as standard. For the US, the 13B engine made 146 horsepower, but offered a turbo version that made 182, identified by an intercooler scoop on the hood, and in 1988 they introduced a convertible version as well. Updated multiple times over its run until 1992, those last years now made 160 horsepower or 200 horsepower as a turbo. The third generation was introduced in 1991, going on sale in the US in '92 as a '93 model. Now a two-seater versus the 2+2 it was previously, the 13B engine was only offered as a sequential twin-turbo making 252 horsepower. A 5-speed manual was standard with optional 4-speed automatic, and option packages layered on the luxury with items like leather, sunroof, or a Bose stereo. By '95, sales only reached 1,400, far below its heyday, and it was canceled in the US and in Europe, although it continued through 2002 in other markets such as Japan. The development of the next generation dated back to 1995 when they began showing the RX-01 concept. Mazda was in a tough position at the time, and Ford was buying an increasing financial and managerial interest in the company, so development proceeded slowly. In 2001, the RX Evolve concept car with what was termed freestyle rear doors was developed, and it was given the green light to proceed under the condition the final car had 4 doors. It was once again a 2+2 and released in 2003 as a US 2004 model with another updated version of the 13B two-rotor engine now named Renesis. As sold worldwide, it displaced 1.3 liters and made 191 horsepower with either a 5-speed manual or 4-speed auto. An optional version of the engine made 238 horsepower with a 6-speed manual. A 6-speed auto was made available in 2006. The US received downrated engines at 197 and 232 horsepower, with the 4-speed auto and 6-speed manual at launch, and the 6-speed auto coming for 2006. For which the top engine was downrated to 212 horsepower. The RX-8 received a mid-cycle refresh in 2008, primarily strengthening the structure and improving the suspension while freshening its appearance. In 2010, the Renesis engine could not meet Europe's ever stricter emission standards, and it was withdrawn. And by 2012, production stopped with over 192,000 units sold over 9 years. Of note, the many variations and updates of the 13B engine make it the most produced Wankel engine in history, spanning over 30 years of production. The end of the RX-8 wasn't the end of the Wankel for Mazda. They continued to develop it over the years in a variety of other cars, including a 1990 version of the Cosmo with a 3-rotor engine. In 2023, they launched the MX-30 REV, a hybrid crossover with a Wankel engine as a range extender in some international markets. Mazda teased the return of the RX-7 several times in the past, including in 2015 when they introduced the RX Vision concept, and again in 2023 with the iconic SP concept using the rotary in conjunction with a battery pack, promising production around the 2028 model year. It may jump out that they skipped the RX-1 and the RX-6, and it's unknown as why, but versions did exist in concept. The RX-01 was that concept from 1995 and was envisioned as a more affordable successor to the RX-7. Of course, this isn't an in-depth history of the RX-7 or RX-8, but a broad look at the history of the rotary engine and how Mazda developed the RX series, even in those cars in the 60s that we never really saw here. It's also not intended to be a complete history of the Wankel engine, including a 1974 minibus they did called the Parkway. Also, about the RX name, while at the beginning I said it stood for Rotary Experimental, that has never actually been confirmed by the company. It could be simply another moniker that sounds cool to them, much like the MX-3, the MX-5, or the MX-6. Thanks for being here, and a special thanks to my Patreons who, those few times I am running ahead of schedule, get early access to videos like these. And also be sure to check out my second channel, All Cars Reacts, where we do reactions, news, opinions, and where I kind of vlog about my thoughts on the automotive world. And if you liked this video, well, be sure to check out this video right here. I think you'll love it.